Ava Miller was used to getting home at 6:15. That's precisely when her shift ended at the Gilded Lily Nail Spa, a small but cozy establishment 2 blocks from her home, where she'd worked as a nail technician for 5 years. 5 years of the smell of polish and the sound of files. That many years of tending to strangers' hands and listening to personal stories they told more freely than they would to a therapist. Ava knew how to listen and smile when she didn't feel like it, and how to keep a straight face when something inside was cracking. Outwardly, she was the kind of woman you don't notice right away, not because she was unattractive, but because she didn't scream for attention. Medium height, dark wavy hair to her shoulders that she usually pulled back into a ponytail, not wasting time on styling. Her hands were always manicured, a professional habit. Her gaze was direct, without flirtation or excessive softness. Her colleagues at the salon said of her, "Ava is someone you can rely on." Clients said she didn't gossip but always sensed when they needed support. For the last 2 years, her husband hadn't said anything about her. He had simply stopped noticing. Stephen Miller was a man whom nature had blessed with good looks, but had completely failed to give character to match. Tall, with regular features, he knew how to make a first impression: a charming smile, confident speech, an expensive watch bought on credit. But a first impression was all he had to offer. Beyond that lay a void, masked by irritability. He changed jobs every year and a half, explaining it away as not being appreciated, and got involved in shady business ventures with his buddies. And each time, it was Ava who pulled the family out of the latest financial hole. Silently, without reproaches. She convinced herself that this was what marriage was: enduring and holding on. She had seen Jessica Thorne twice. The first time was by accident 8 months ago, when she picked Stephen up from a work happy hour and noticed an unfamiliar woman holding his elbow for a little too long while saying goodbye. The second time was in a photo on his phone, which opened by itself when he asked Ava to answer a call. She said nothing then, just placed the phone face down on the table and stepped out onto the balcony. She stood there for a moment, then came back and made dinner. She was buying time because she was afraid. Not of Stephen. She had stopped being afraid of him long ago. She was afraid of destroying what their daughter, Olivia, called our family. The girl loved her father, no matter what, and Ava couldn't erase that with a single decision of her own. On that September evening, she walked home a little faster than usual. Her back ached, and she longed for a hot cup of tea and some quiet. Olivia should have been back from school at 3, and Ava had managed to call her at 4 to make sure everything was okay. Her daughter's replies were strange, in short phrases, almost without emotion, but Ava chalked it up to fatigue after a big math test. She never imagined that there would be no quiet today. The door to their condo was unlocked. Not just unlocked, the deadbolt had been opened from the outside with a key. Ava stopped for a second, fumbling in her jacket pocket for her own key. It was there. That meant someone had used the second set. Stephen, or someone with his key. She walked in. What Ava saw in the hallway didn't register for the first few seconds. Her brain simply refused to accept the scene as real. In the middle of the corridor stood her large suitcase, the one they had taken on vacation 3 years ago, their last trip together, when she still believed things could be fixed. The suitcase was open, and a woman was leaning over it. Not Stephen, a woman. Jessica Thorne was one of those people who know how to occupy someone else's space as if it had always belonged to them. 35, tall, confident in every movement, with dark hair flowing freely. She was unhurriedly placing Ava's things into the suitcase, a stack of sweaters from the top shelf of the closet, a bathroom organizer that was somehow already sitting there. She did it calmly, almost methodically, as if sorting through her own wardrobe for seasonal storage. "Oh, you're here," Jessica said without turning around. "Good. You can grab whatever I haven't gotten to yet." Ava didn't move. Something inside her, that survival instinct that sets apart those who know how to endure, ordered her to stand still, watch, and not scream. Jessica finally turned. On her face was that particular expression of condescension seen in people who are certain of their own impunity. "Don't worry so much. We'll leave you some cash for the first month. You and your daughter can rent a little apartment for a while," she said, a smirk playing on her lips. "You'll land on your feet." "We," she had said. "We." Ava slowly shifted her gaze down the hall. Stephen peeked out of the bedroom for a second. No more. He met her eyes and immediately stepped back, as if he'd seen a stranger to whom he had nothing to say. He didn't even try to speak. He just hid. And in that silence, in his cowardly step back, was everything she needed to know about the man she had lived with for 10 years. 33 years. Ava had lived for 33 years, and the last 10 of them were with this man. She remembered how they met at a mutual friend's birthday party, how he had been funny and a little awkward then, and she, the fool, had decided that his awkwardness was sincerity. All these years she had pulled him out of debt, supported him through job changes, borne him a child, and forgiven his silence and distance. And now he was standing behind a door, hiding his eyes while another woman packed her life into a suitcase. "Mom." The voice was quiet, almost a whisper. Ava looked down. Olivia was standing in the doorway of her room, small in her school uniform, which she hadn't had a chance to change out of. 9 years old, hazel eyes, just like Ava's. And right now, there was something in them that made her mother's throat tighten. Not fear, seriousness. That adult, unchildlike seriousness that appears in children when they understand. The adults are broken, and I have to hold it together. Olivia was exactly that kind of child, one who noticed things. Not because anyone explained them to her. She had simply watched the world intently from birth, with a quiet attention that adults often mistake for shyness. She was the first to sense when her mom and dad started speaking too cautiously, like they were walking on thin ice. The first to notice that Dad was going out more and more often in the evenings. And the first to understand today that something was happening that Mom needed to know about, right now. Olivia came closer, pulled on her mother's sleeve, and stood on her tiptoes. "Mom," she whispered directly into her ear, "we need to leave, right now. I have to tell you something." Jessica shot them a brief glance and demonstratively returned to the suitcase. Ava took her daughter's hand and walked into the kitchen. She closed the door, not slammed it, but closed it carefully until it clicked. She sat on a stool in front of Olivia, to look her in the eye. "Tell me, everything you saw," Olivia began, rushing. "When you called at 4, I was in the hallway. That lady came earlier, with Dad. They thought I was asleep. I lay down after school because my head hurt, but I could hear them talking. Then I got up to get some water, and I saw through the crack in the door." "What did you see?" She took a little baggie out of her purse, a clear one, with something white inside, and she put it, like this. Olivia gestured with her hands, "Under your clothes in the suitcase," and she told Dad, "Let them find it, and she'll just disappear. No courts, no alimony." The silence in the kitchen was so deafening that Ava could hear the ticking of the clock above the refrigerator, a baggie, white powder, under her clothes in the suitcase, and the phrase, whose meaning left no room for doubt. This wasn't just an attempt to kick her out of her home. This was a setup, the kind you couldn't explain away, couldn't deny, couldn't easily prove your innocence against. With that kind of baggage, you could lose not just a condo, but your daughter and your freedom. Ava sat up straight. Inside her, she was surprised by this. Later, there was no panic. There was cold. A clear, steady, cold, like ice under her feet that couldn't be broken with a sudden move, or she'd fall through. "You're a smart girl," she told Olivia quietly. "You did everything right. Now, listen to me. You stay here, in the kitchen. Don't open the door. Okay?" Olivia nodded. Ava pulled out her phone. The first call was to Chloe Davis, a friend who lived a 10-minute walk away. They had been friends since high school. If there was anyone she could say, "I need you, right now," without having to explain, it was her. Chloe was a special kind of woman, one of those who don't ask unnecessary questions in a crisis but just grabs her purse and leaves the house. She worked as an accountant, was practical to the bone, and possessed one rare quality. She could maintain absolute calm in the midst of someone else's chaos. "Chloe, I really need you. Right now. You know the address. What happened? Just come. I'll explain. It's urgent, and life or death. Please." Second step. Ava opened the camera app on her phone and started recording a video. She slowly walked out of the kitchen and into the hallway. Jessica was still standing by the suitcase. Ava moved so that the frame captured the suitcase, the woman standing over it, and the clothes themselves. She filmed in silence, without commentary, without getting closer to the suitcase. Not a single touch. That was important. Vitally necessary. Jessica noticed the phone. "What are you doing? Filming me?" Irritation crept into her voice. "Yes," Ava said calmly. "Put that camera away. You can't film me without my consent. In my own home, I can." Ava turned her head slightly. "This condo is registered in my name. You can check the county records." This was true. 5 years ago, when they took out the mortgage, the loan was in Ava's name. Stephen had a bad credit score. He had said thank you back then. Apparently, he'd forgotten. Jessica fell silent, but her gaze grew sharper. Third step. Ava went back into the kitchen, closed the door, and dialed 911. "Good evening. I want to report a conflict and a possible planting of illegal substances at..." She gave the address clearly, without faltering. "There is a stranger in my home who is packing my belongings into a suitcase. My child witnessed a baggie with a substance, presumably illegal, being placed in the suitcase. I have not touched the suitcase. I request you send officers to conduct a proper inspection." The dispatcher confirmed the details, asking her to stay on the line and not touch anything. "I understand," Ava said. "That's exactly what I'm doing." She put the phone away. Olivia watched her, sitting on a kitchen stool, clutching her school backpack like a shield. "Is everything going to be okay?" her daughter asked. "Yes," Ava said. "We're going to do everything right." From the hallway, she could hear Jessica's footsteps. She was pacing, clearly nervous. Then Stephen's muffled voice, "Jessica, how are you doing in there?" And her short, angry reply, "Fine. Just let them try anything." Ava stood by the window, looking down into the courtyard. The main door of the building slammed shut somewhere below. On the playground, someone's dog was pulling on its leash. Life outside the window went on as usual, unaware that here, on the 4th floor, her freedom was being decided. She thought about how Jessica must have been so sure. Ava would walk in, see the suitcase, rush to unpack her things, find the baggie or not find it, and then it would be found under the right circumstances. Or Ava would understand everything, get scared, and leave quietly, without a fight, without any claim to the condo, without child support. Or she would start screaming, threatening, and then there would be a reason to call the police on her. A hysterical, unstable woman. Ava had chosen none of those options. 20 minutes later, the intercom buzzed. It was Chloe. 30 minutes later, a police car pulled up to the building. Ava took Olivia's hand, walked out of the kitchen, and opened the front door. Jessica turned away from the suitcase. For the first time all evening, the expression on her face was neither confidence nor condescension. It was fear, and Ava noticed it, memorized it, because that exact moment, the one where the other person realizes they've miscalculated, was worth all the coldness and all the composure of the last half hour. A uniformed police officer appeared in the doorway. Behind him was another, and next to them, out of breath with her phone in her hand, was Chloe. She had managed to run over just as the squad car arrived and had come up with them, standing slightly behind and silently scanning the room with the sharp gaze of someone who understood instantly. Something very serious was happening here. "Who is the resident of this property?" the first officer asked. "I am," Ava said evenly. "I'm ready to explain everything." Officer Mark Riley was the kind of cop you couldn't break with tears, shouting, or pressure. 41 years old, solidly built, with short-cropped dark hair already showing streaks of gray. His face was closed off, professionally neutral, the kind that betrays neither sympathy nor judgment prematurely. He entered the condo first, quickly scanning the entryway. A suitcase, open, filled with clothes, a woman beside it, another woman in the kitchen doorway with a child behind her, a man hovering in the back of the hallway. It was immediately clear he had seen this before. Not this exact scenario, but something with a similar structure. A domestic dispute with a property claim. Except this time, the caller had mentioned illegal substances from the start. And that changed everything. Riley stopped in the middle of the hallway and said quietly, "I'm going to need everyone to stay where they are. Nobody touches anything." The second officer, a younger man in his 20s with a notepad, stood by the front door. Chloe Davis, who had come in with the officers and had only managed to give Ava a quick, supportive glance that said, "I'm here, I'm with you, talk," stepped back against the wall and fell silent. She understood it wasn't her turn yet. Riley turned to Ava. "You're the one who called?" "Yes. Ava Miller. I am the owner of this condo. The mortgage is in my name." She spoke clearly, without rushing, without excess emotion. "Today, upon returning from work around 6:30 p.m., I discovered a stranger in my home." Ava pointed at Jessica. "This woman, Jessica Thorne, my husband's mistress, was packing my personal belongings into a suitcase without my knowledge or consent. I have not touched or approached the suitcase since my arrival. My daughter, Olivia, witnessed Miss Thorne place a small bag containing a substance, presumably illegal, into the suitcase." Riley listened without interrupting, then gave a short nod. "Who else is in the residence?" "My husband, Stephen Miller." Ava didn't turn around, just stated his name. "He's in the other room. I'll ask everyone present to please move into the living room." Jessica moved first, calmly, with a straight back, as if she had nothing to hide. But Ava noticed her fingers clench slightly, and she didn't immediately take her hands off the suitcase. She lingered for a fraction of a second, her gaze fixed on it, as if mentally calculating if she had time to do something. She didn't. Riley noticed it too. "Don't touch it," he repeated calmly, and Jessica removed her hands. The living room felt crowded. Stephen sat on the edge of the sofa, slumped over, looking like a man caught doing something shameful who hadn't yet decided whether to confess or deny it. Jessica stood by the window. Ava remained standing by the entrance, with Olivia silently pressed against her side. Chloe settled onto a chair near the wall, quiet and unobtrusive, like someone who had come not to speak, but to see. The young officer opened his notepad. "Let's start by identifying everyone." Riley looked at Jessica. "Your information. Jessica Thorne, 35. Her voice was even, almost bored. "Address of residence?" Jessica gave an address in a different part of the city. "So you are not registered here and do not live here?" A short but noticeable pause. "I am here with Stephen. He invited me." "Do you have keys to the property?" Stephen opened the door. "So, no keys." Riley stated it not as a question, but as a fact, and turned to Stephen. "Do you confirm that you gave this woman permission to be in the condo?" Stephen lifted his head. He looked as if he had spent the last hour anticipating a very different conversation, one without police. Yeah, she's with me. The property is registered to you, or your wife?" "To her. But I live here. I have rights." "That's a separate issue," Riley cut in, not rudely, but firmly. "For now, we're establishing the facts. The property is registered to Ava Miller. Miss Thorne is not a resident and does not have keys. She gained access through Mr. Miller." He turned back to Ava. "You reported a suspicion of planted illegal substances. Please elaborate." "When I came home, my daughter told me she saw Miss Thorne take a clear baggie with a white powder out of her purse and place it under the clothes in the suitcase. While doing so, she said the following to my husband." Ava paused for effect. "Let them find it, and she'll just disappear. No courts, no alimony." "After my daughter told me this, I immediately called you, alerted a witness." She nodded towards Chloe and started a video recording. "I have not touched the suitcase at all." "You have a video recording?" "Yes." Ava held out her phone. "It shows me entering the hallway. The suitcase was open. Miss Thorne was standing next to it. I did not touch the lid or the contents." Riley watched the video in silence, then handed the phone to the young officer, who began to document it in his report. "We need to conduct a search," Riley said to his partner. "Go secure the scene. I'll get the warrant process started." While his partner worked, a heavy silence hung in the living room. Jessica stood by the window with a stone-faced expression, but Ava saw her glance periodically at Stephen. Short, demanding looks. "Hold it together. Stay quiet." Stephen stared at the floor. Chloe took out her phone and silently began her own video recording, not making it obvious, just documenting the general atmosphere in the room. Ava noticed and gave her a nearly imperceptible nod. "We are proceeding with a search of the suitcase," Riley announced upon his partner's return. "The suitcase belongs to the complainant?" "Yes," Ava said. "And the items inside are yours?" "They are mine." I did not pack them. Miss Thorne was packing them in my absence. Riley put on a pair of gloves. The young officer stood beside him with his notepad. The suitcase was opened. On top were sweaters, folded neatly, almost caringly, exactly how one would fold things to make it look natural. Riley methodically, unhurriedly, began to go through the contents, layer by layer, in silence. The only sounds in the living room were the rustle of fabric and the quiet creak of the floorboards under the officer's feet. The baggie was found in the third layer, under a stack of clothes, pressed against the side wall of the suitcase. Clear, sealed, about the size of a palm. White substance inside. Document it, Riley said to his partner. The baggie was removed with tweezers, placed into a special evidence bag, sealed, and labeled with the date, time, and address. The young officer recorded everything in the report. Make sure the report reflects, Ava said calmly, that the complainant did not touch the suitcase before the arrival of law enforcement, which is confirmed by video evidence and a witness statement. Riley looked at her, not with surprise, but with the professional respect one develops for people who know what they need. It will be noted, he said. Jessica, who had been standing by the window the whole time, suddenly exhaled sharply. She put it there herself, she said loudly. I was just packing her things, like Stephen asked. I have no idea what that baggie is. Maybe it was in there for a long time. Riley turned to her slowly. So, you are stating that you did not place this item in the suitcase? Of course not. And before the search began, this item was already in the suitcase. I don't know when it got there. So, you're allowing for the possibility that it could have been there before you arrived? Jessica hesitated for a second. She realized the trap. If she said yes, it meant the substance was in the suitcase when Ava wasn't home, meaning when only she had access to it. If she said no, it meant she knew it wasn't there before her arrival, which implied knowledge of its appearance. I don't know, she repeated, but without her earlier confidence. On the sofa, Stephen mumbled something unintelligible. Riley looked at him. Do you have something to say? No, Stephen said, looking at the floor. Nothing. Then I will ask you and Miss Thorne to provide written statements. Riley nodded to his partner. Forms. They wrote their statements separately, each in a corner of the room. Jessica wrote quickly, pressing hard, as if angry at the paper. Stephen wrote slowly, stopping several times, quietly chewing on the end of his pen. Ava gave her statement orally for the report. The partner transcribed it verbatim. She spoke evenly, without embellishment. What time she returned, what she saw, what her daughter said, what actions she took, what she did not touch. Not a single extra word, not a single accusation that couldn't be confirmed. Chloe also gave a statement. She arrived at her friend's request, entered the building at the same time as the officers, saw the open suitcase, and saw that Ava did not touch it from the moment she appeared in the condo. We'll get your information as well, the partner told Chloe, and she calmly recited her contact details, like someone with nothing to hide. By the time all the statements were written and signed, it was completely dark outside. Streetlights shone into the living room window. Olivia had dozed off in an armchair, her knees pulled to her chest, and no one dared to wake her. Even Jessica, who glanced at the girl several times with that particular expression people get when they start to realize that a small, unwanted witness has become a very big problem. Riley put the documents in a folder and looked at Jessica. An investigation will be opened regarding the discovered substance. As part of it, the origin of the item will be determined. I recommend that all parties involved do not leave the city and remain available for contact. What investigation? Jessica stood up straight. I didn't do anything. You don't even know what's in that baggie. That is precisely what the lab analysis is for, Riley said without inflection. Until the results are back, all possibilities are being considered. He turned to Ava. Regarding the presence of an unauthorized person in your home, we will also file a report. I recommend you speak with an attorney. I'm already thinking about it, Ava said. When the officers left, taking with them the sealed evidence bag and the completed reports, a different kind of silence remained in the condo. Not tense, like before, but oppressive. Jessica stood in the middle of the living room, looking at Ava as if seeing her for the first time. You think you did the right thing? She finally said quietly, almost without expression. Yes, I did everything right, Ava replied. This isn't over. No, Ava agreed. It's not over. But I'm the one who started it. She walked to the armchair, gently woke Olivia, and took her hand. Come on, sweetie, she said to her daughter. You're going to spend the night at Aunt Chloe's. And they walked out of the living room without looking back. Chloe walked beside them, shoulder to shoulder. Behind them remained Stephen, who never lifted his gaze, and Jessica, who for the first time all evening had no idea what to do next. The night at Chloe's was almost sleepless. Olivia fell asleep quickly. A child's body takes what it needs, even when the adult world is cracking at the seams. But Ava sat in her friend's kitchen until 2 a.m, staring at a single point on the checkered tablecloth. Chloe didn't pry with questions, just sat beside her, periodically refilling her tea. It was the kind of silence only very close friends can share, the kind that understands that words are not needed right now. It was Ava who started talking, not right away. First, she stared at the tablecloth for a long time, then said quietly, I thought the worst thing was finding out about Jessica, that he was cheating, that all this time I was living with someone who didn't see me. She paused. It turns out I was wrong. The worst thing is that he agreed. That, he nodded when she suggested it. Chloe didn't answer, just stroked her shoulder. The next morning, while Olivia ate cereal and watched cartoons on a tablet, Ava called a law firm. Chloe had given her the number. As an accountant, she had connections with various professionals and knew the right people. The attorney, Catherine Pierce, was available that very day at noon. Kate had been a lawyer for 10 years, specializing in family law and criminal defense, a rare combination, but exactly what Ava needed right now. 36 years old, with a short haircut, thin-framed glasses, and a business suit without any fuss. She listened to Ava attentively, without interrupting, making notes in a legal pad. When Ava finished, Kate put down her pen. You acted correctly, she said without preamble. Immediately contacting the police, the video recording before the search, a witness who can confirm you didn't touch the suitcase. That's a strong position, but Olivia is the only one who saw Jessica plant the bag. That's not a weakness, Kate said. It's a separate issue that needs to be handled correctly. A child's testimony in cases like this is a delicate matter. Ava understood this intuitively. Kate explained it legally. Olivia couldn't be questioned like an adult witness. The procedure was different, gentler, involving a specialist, but the very fact that Olivia had told her mother about the plant, and told her before anyone had a chance to explain what was happening, was already documented in the police report, and that was crucial. A 9-year-old child could not have known the significance of a clear baggie with white powder, Kate said. She described what she saw. The lady took out a baggie and hid it under the clothes, and she quoted the words she heard. That's not interpretation, it's observation. And that's exactly how we will frame it. They made an agreement. Kate would take the case. 2 fronts, family and criminal. On the family side, divorce, child support, and securing custody of Olivia for her mother. On the criminal side, defending Ava from any attempts to shift blame for the discovered substance onto her and simultaneously building a case against Jessica. Until the lab results are back, we wait, Kate said, but we start building our strategy now. The next day, a Friday, Kate Pierce contacted the detective assigned to the case. The detective was a woman in her 40s. Ava wasn't present for the conversation, but Kate relayed the gist of it that evening, concisely and to the point. They want to have an informal chat with Olivia, with a psychologist present. Not an interrogation, a conversation. I insisted on being there. They've agreed to it for Monday. Ava nodded. She's ready. She's more ready than many of the adults I've seen in that chair, Kate said, and for the first time, a hint of warmth entered her voice. On Sunday evening, Ava talked to her daughter. She didn't rehearse answers or explain what to say. She just sat beside her on the bed, and Olivia, flipping through a book, suddenly asked on her own, Mom, do I have to talk about what I saw tomorrow? Yes, just what you saw yourself. No need to make anything up. Okay, just what happened. Olivia nodded and closed her book. I remember it exactly, she said. I didn't imagine it. I know, Ava said. On Monday morning, the conversation with Olivia took place in a room that psychologists call a soft room. Comfortable chairs, Neutral colors, no desks with files, no institutional lighting. The specialist, a young woman with a quiet voice, spoke to the girl as if they were just chatting, without any formal rigidity. Kate sat silently in the corner. Ava waited in the hallway. The conversation lasted about 40 minutes. When Olivia came out, the first thing she asked was if she could get a juice from the vending machine by the elevator. Ava gave her $1 and watched her daughter walk down the hall, straight back, calm steps, and thought that she had raised a very resilient child. It was unclear where such resilience came from. Maybe it happens when a child learns from a young age to understand the things that adults prefer not to see. Kate came out next and said quietly, "It went well." She described everything sequentially, without contradictions. It's on record. The child observed the actions, described the object, and reproduced the words she heard at the time of the event. The key point is that she did not and could not have understood the meaning of what was happening. She simply reported a fact. That works in our favor. Meanwhile, Stephen, who had remained in the condo with Jessica, was beginning to understand that the situation had spiraled beyond the boundaries he had imagined for it. He had counted on a simple scenario. Ava would get scared and leave. The issue with the condo would be resolved quietly, without publicity. Jessica had convinced him it would be better for everyone that way, quick and without a legal battle. He had believed her. He always believed people who spoke with confidence. It was his greatest flaw, far more destructive than his cowardice. But now there were police, a report, a sealed evidence bag with a baggie, a lab analysis, and a lawyer he had never met but was already afraid of. And most importantly, there was his 9-year-old daughter, who was sitting with a detective and telling them exactly what she had seen. He called Ava on Tuesday morning. She picked up. "Ava," he began, his voice having the tone of someone trying to sound calm when everything inside is crumbling. "We need to talk. Without lawyers." "All conversations go through my lawyer," Ava said. "Ava, wait. I wanted to say..." He fell silent for a few seconds. "This has gone too far. I didn't think it would turn out like this." "What exactly didn't you think?" she asked evenly. "That I would call the police? Or that Olivia would see it?" He didn't answer. "Steve," Ava said, and there was no anger in her voice, only weariness, and that particular clarity that comes as when a person has already made a decision and no longer needs any confirmation. You could have stopped her. At any point before she put that baggie in there, you could have said no. You didn't. She hung up. At the same time, Jessica was building her own line of defense. She was confident. The child was young, her testimony unstable. A lawyer could argue that the girl had gotten confused or imagined things. The witness, Ava's friend, was a biased party. The video recording only showed Jessica standing by the suitcase, not that she was putting anything into it. Therefore, there was no direct evidence. Therefore, she could withstand it. But Jessica had overlooked one thing. She was a person who thought fast, but spoke even faster. And in the past few days, she had said too much more than once. On Friday evening, after the police had left, she sent Ava a text message. A short message, likely sent in a moment when rage had overcome calculation. "You think you're so smart. I said you would leave. That means you will leave. The baggie is just the beginning." Ava read the message, took a screenshot showing the time, date, and sender's name, and forwarded it to Kate. Kate called 10 minutes later. "This is very important." She writes, "The baggie," which means she knows which specific item we're talking about, but according to her version, she had no idea what it was or where it came from. This is a direct contradiction. Documented. "Already did," Ava said. "Good. Don't reply to any more of her messages. Let her write. Every word works against her." In parallel, the story with Stephen was unfolding. He gave his statement to the detective on Thursday, and from what became known later, his account was neither consistent nor convincing. At first, he claimed that Jessica was just helping pack and didn't touch the suitcase without his knowledge. Then, when reminded that his own words contradicted this, he corrected himself. He wasn't watching her every move. Then he added that maybe she did put something in, but he didn't think it was serious. The detective recorded all three versions from one person about a single event. This wasn't confusion. It was a lie in the process of disintegrating. Jessica found out about this on Friday evening. Stephen told her himself, apparently hoping for support. Instead, she exploded. The neighbors through the wall heard shouting. This later became known because the neighbor from the third floor, the same one who had acted as a witness for the police, mentioned it in a casual conversation with a patrol officer. The officer made a note. By the end of the first week, after that September evening, the picture was beginning to take shape, not in Jessica's favor. Her version, "I knew nothing. I was just packing," was falling apart at the seams. The contradiction in Stephen's statements. Her own text message mentioning the baggie. Olivia's consistent account, documented by a specialist. Ava's immediate actions, never touching the suitcase and following procedure from the very first minute. Jessica had set a trap that had snapped shut, just not where she had expected. Ava learned about the results of the first week from Kate on Saturday morning. She called and reported briefly, without unnecessary preambles. The lab results came back sooner than expected. The substance is confirmed to be illegal. The inquiry is now a criminal investigation. Thorne's status is changing. What does that mean? Ava asked. It means she's no longer just a witness in a domestic dispute. Now she's going to be questioned differently. Ava put down the phone. Olivia was drawing something in the next room at Chloe's. The sound of a pencil scratching on paper could be heard. Outside, the late September sun was shining, yellow and a little sad, like the last warmth before a long cold. Ava thought about Jessica. Not with anger. The anger had dissipated somewhere during that night she sat over a cold cup of tea. All that remained was a sober, almost calm understanding. This woman had been so confident in someone else's weakness that she was completely unprepared for someone else's strength. And Ava had turned out to be stronger than Jessica could have possibly imagined. The second week began with Jessica Thorne calling Stephen on Sunday morning and speaking to him for 40 minutes. Stephen later couldn't remember exactly what she had said. It's like that when you listen to someone who is simultaneously persuading, threatening, and demanding, all in the same breathless voice. He only remembered the general gist. Stick to the story. Don't change your testimony. Tell the detective the baggie could have been there for a long time, that Jessica never touched it, that Olivia was little and could have been mistaken. If he broke now, she would never forgive him. Stephen listened and said nothing. That was another one of his traits, staying silent when he should have spoken, and speaking when he should have been silent. After the call, he sat in the kitchen for a long time, staring out the window. The courtyard was noisy. Kids were kicking a soccer ball on the asphalt. A neighbor's dog barked at them. A car drove by. Ordinary life, which had no idea that he was sitting here, trying to decide whose side to be on. Not out of conscience, he'd had trouble with that long before this story began, but out of fear. He was afraid of Jessica. He was afraid of the detective and the lawyer, Catherine Pierce, whom he had glimpsed in the hallway of her office, and who had looked at him as if she already knew everything about him, including things he hadn't yet admitted to himself. But most of all, he was afraid to look Olivia in the eyes. Not because his daughter would do or say anything more. She had already said what she saw, and there was no replaying that. He was afraid of her gaze the way she had looked at him that evening when the police came. No tears, no screaming, just looking, the way you look at a stranger you're seeing for the first time, unsure if they can be trusted. That look hadn't left his mind, day or night. On Monday, Jessica went to the detective for a second interview, this time with a lawyer she had hired over the weekend. The lawyer was the type who would take any case if paid up front, and he built his defense on the only available material: doubt. A child's testimony is unreliable due to age. The witness is the complainant's friend, hence a biased party. The video recording only captures the general scene, not a specific action. The substance could have ended up in the suitcase in any number of ways, including belonging to Ava herself. The detective listened, nodded, took notes, and then placed a printout on the table. The screenshot of the text message exchange. Jessica's message to Ava, sent on Friday evening, a few hours after the police had left. "You think you're so smart. I said you would leave. That means you will leave. The baggie is just the beginning." Jessica's lawyer read it. He paused. "This could be interpreted in various ways," he said cautiously. "The word baggie," the detective said calmly, is used in the exact context in which it appears in the case file. Your client claimed in her statement that she knew nothing about the baggie and did not understand what was being discussed. This message contradicts that statement. Jessica sat upright, her face unreadable, but her fingers lay too still on her lap. People hold their hands like that when they are trying with all their might not to betray tension with a gesture. "I meant something else," she said. "I heard about the baggie from Stephen. He told me after the police left." "So, you learned about the baggie from your partner," the detective clarified, "and not from your own observation?" "Yes." "Then please clarify what exactly Mr. Miller told you." A pause. Too long for someone who is simply repeating what they heard. That the police found some kind of baggie in the suitcase. Did he specifically call it a baggie? Well, something like that. In the report filed by Officer Riley, the item is referred to as a polymer bag. Those are different terms. How did the specific word baggie appear in your message? Jessica opened her mouth and then closed it again. Her lawyer placed a hand on her forearm, a quiet signal. "Be quiet. We will consider this matter and provide a written response," he said. The detective nodded and made a note. After that interview, Jessica walked out into the hallway and immediately called Stephen. Ava found out about that call later. Stephen told her himself, after he had made a decision that cost him a great deal, but perhaps saved him from something worse. On Wednesday of the third week after that September evening, Stephen Miller went to the detective without an appointment, without a lawyer, alone. He sat in the chair across from the desk, placed his hands on the table, and said, "I want to change my statement." The detective started the recorder, warning him of the penalties for perjury. Stephen nodded mechanically at each point, like a man who has already made a decision and is now just executing it step by step. "Jessica Thorne brought the baggie with her," he said. "I saw it in her purse before we even entered the condo. She said it was for insurance, that if Ava found it, she'd get scared and leave on her own, without a court fight. Or if she didn't find it now, it would be found later, under the right circumstances." He paused. I asked her, "What if this is serious?" She said, "Not your problem. The main thing is the condo will be ours." I agreed. I shouldn't have agreed, but I did. The detective wrote, not rushing, not commenting. "Why are you changing your testimony now?" he asked, when Stephen fell silent. Stephen looked away, then turned his head and told the detective, "Because my daughter sat in your office and told you what she saw. And this whole time, I've been trying to make her words mean nothing," he exhaled. "I can't live with that." It was, perhaps, the only honest sentence he had spoken in the last few weeks. Catherine Pierce learned about Stephen's new testimony that same evening. The detective notified her as the complainant's attorney. She called Ava immediately. He testified against Jessica. He confirmed that she brought the substance intentionally to set you up, and that he knew about it beforehand. Ava was silent for a few seconds. Does he understand what this means for him? Yes. He will also be investigated as an accessory, someone aware of a crime being planned. This won't go away for him without consequences. But his testimony significantly changes the picture for Jessica. "Okay," Ava said, and nothing more. She didn't feel triumphant, didn't feel relieved. Not in that moment. It was something else, difficult to describe. A feeling like a large, heavy machine that had been moving straight toward her had finally started to break. It hadn't stopped yet, but it was breaking. Jessica learned about Stephen's testimony on Thursday. What happened next, Ava would later call the moment a person loses the last thing that was keeping them in check. Jessica called Ava. Not a text, a call, at 9:30 the evening. Ava didn't answer right away. She had time to start the call recorder. "Listen to me carefully," Jessica said. Her voice was even, but something was humming beneath that evenness, like a live wire. "You think you've won? You haven't won anything. Steve broke because he's always been a spineless coward. But that doesn't change what I know about you." "What exactly do you know about me?" Ava asked calmly. "I know you have nothing but this condo and that job at the salon. I know you held on to him because you were afraid of being alone. And I know you thought the baggie wouldn't be found in time. You thought you'd get away quietly, and no one would prove anything." A pause. "No," Ava said. "It was you who thought the baggie wouldn't be found in time, not me." The silence on the other end was very eloquent. "You've said enough now," Ava added. "Have a good evening." She hung up and immediately forwarded the recording to Kate with a short message. She called, "Recording attached." Kate replied in 3 minutes. "Perfect. She just did part of our job for us." In that call, Jessica had uttered a phrase that, combined with the text message and Stephen's testimony, painted a very clear picture. She knew about the baggie, knew about it in advance, and was confident it would not be found in time. This meant she had anticipated a different discovery scenario than the one that occurred. For the detective, this wasn't just a slip of the tongue. It was another brick in the wall of evidence. On Friday morning, Jessica was called in again. This time, the interview was tougher, shorter, and ended with something she hadn't expected. She was officially named a suspect. Her lawyer said something about procedures and rights. She nodded, but her face looked as if the ground was giving way beneath her feet, with nothing to hold on to. She wasn't arrested. The pre-trial restrictions didn't yet include detention, but her phone was confiscated for analysis, and she was ordered not to leave the city. Ava found out about this from Kate that same day, around noon. Official suspect status for possession and transport of a controlled substance with intent to cause harm, Kate said concisely. This isn't the end, but it's a very serious turn. The case is heading in the right direction. Ava was sitting in a cafe near the salon. She had returned to work 3 days ago because life doesn't stop, clients were booked, and she needed to earn a living regardless of what was happening at home. Her colleagues didn't ask any questions. She didn't share. And to inquiries, she replied briefly, "Family matters." That was enough. She finished her coffee and looked out the window. A woman was walking down the street with a stroller. 2 schoolboys rode by on bicycles. A woman was selling flowers on the corner. September was ending. The air had grown cooler, but the sun was still warm, and the leaves on the trees weren't yellow yet. They were just beginning to change color, still holding on to their green with a slight reddish tint at the edges. Ava thought that this was what her life looked like now. Not new yet, but changing. Not yet free of the past, but no longer clinging to it. She paid for her coffee, walked outside, and headed back to the salon. In half an hour, a client, a manicure, small talk about nothing important. In the evening, Olivia, who needed to be picked up from Chloe's and brought back to their condo, where Jessica would never enter again. She had changed the locks when she returned to the apartment. It was the first decision she had made not out of fear, but simply because it was the right thing to do, because the condo was hers, because Olivia needed a home, because a new life begins not with grand words, but with concrete actions. Changing the locks, calling a lawyer, returning to work, a hot cup of tea in the evening instead of a cold one. On Saturday evening, she sat with Olivia in the kitchen of her own condo, their kitchen, with new keys on the hook by the door. Olivia was drawing with colored pencils. Soup was warming on the stove. It smelled like home. "Mom," Olivia said, without looking up from her drawing, "is Dad not coming back at all now?" Ava paused. Then she answered, "That will depend on a lot of things, but you will see him when everything is properly arranged." Olivia nodded. She picked up another pencil. "Okay," she said, and continued drawing. Ava looked at her daughter and thought that this, right here, soup on the stove, colored pencils, a nod instead of tears, was what had been worth not breaking down that evening when Jessica stood over the open suitcase, absolutely certain of her victory. Jessica had miscalculated not in the details. She had miscalculated in the most important thing, the person. October arrived abruptly. Overnight, it changed the temperature, the color of the sky, and the smell of the air. One morning, it still felt like summer wasn't quite gone, and by the afternoon, it was clear it was. The leaves on the trees in the courtyard turned a true fiery orange. In the mornings, Olivia wore a jacket, and every time Ava buttoned it for her, she thought, "Fall is here." She filed for divorce in the first week of October. Catherine Pierce prepared the documents quickly and precisely, without unnecessary words or sentiment, with the professional composure that is more valuable than any sympathy in difficult times. Along with the divorce petition came a motion to establish Olivia's primary residence with her mother and a petition for child support. 3 separate filings, each meticulously prepared and justified. Stephen didn't contest it, not because he had become a better person, but because he understood he had no room left to maneuver. His testimony against Jessica had become his own sentence in family court. A man who knew about a planned setup against his own wife and did nothing to stop it could not argue for the role of a responsible parent. Kate used this argument precisely, and without excessive pressure. She simply laid out the facts, which spoke for themselves. The first family court hearing took place in mid-October. Ava sat at the table next to Kate and stared straight ahead. Stephen was across from them with a different lawyer he had found at the last minute. They didn't look at each other. 10 years of marriage, and now 2 tables, 2 lawyers, and a judge between them. The judge was an older woman with an attentive face and a habit of asking questions that were short but impossible to evade. She had clearly reviewed the case file beforehand. It was evident in how she phrased her questions, not asking for details she already knew. "Mr. Miller," she said, looking at Stephen, "you do not object to the determination of the child's primary residence with her mother?" "I do not object," he said quietly. "Regarding child support obligations, I'm prepared to pay." His lawyer whispered something to him, but he just shook his head. There was likely no point in haggling anymore. The hearing lasted less than 2 hours. For family court, that was fast. Kate later explained that when one party doesn't object and the evidence on key facts is already established, there's nothing to drag out. The decision on Olivia's custody was granted in favor of her mother. For support, 25% of Stephen's income was ordered monthly, with a minimum fixed amount in case his income proved unstable. The divorce was finalized in the same session by mutual consent, without additional hearings. Ava left the courthouse at 1:30. Kate walked beside her. "Is it over?" Ava asked. "The family part is. The criminal case continues." The criminal case against Jessica Thorne proceeded on its own track. Slower, longer, with more procedural steps. The lab had long since confirmed it. The fingerprints on the baggie belonged to Jessica. The substance inside was a controlled substance. Its distribution, a felony. Its origin was being investigated separately. The detective was working on that front, requesting records, studying the messages from Jessica's confiscated phone. What they found on the phone was perhaps the most unexpected turn of the entire story. Among her messages was a conversation from 2 weeks prior, just a few days before that September evening. Jessica had been texting with a contact saved under the name Tim. The content of the messages was described by the detective in dry, procedural terms, but the meaning was transparent. Jessica was asking how it worked and what would happen if it was found. Tim was answering. Jessica hadn't just impulsively put the baggie in the suitcase. She had prepared, she had planned, she had consulted. This changed the charge from a random act to something far more serious. Jessica's lawyer tried to build a defense on the claim that his client did not realize the consequences and was acting under emotional distress. The detective submitted the text messages into evidence. After that, it became much harder to talk about emotional distress. In early November, a preliminary hearing for the criminal case was held. Kate was present as the representative of the victim's side. Ava had been officially recognized as a victim of the attempted frame-up. Jessica sat at the defendant's table with her lawyer, back straight and face like stone, the same posture as that evening in the living room. But her eyes were different, uncertain, darting. The charges included several counts: possession and transport of a controlled substance, and malicious intent to cause harm, using that substance as a tool of coercion. In the criminal case, Stephen was classified as a person with knowledge of a planned crime who failed to take measures to prevent it. His testimony played a key role in the case against Jessica, while simultaneously placing him in an extremely vulnerable position. The final measure against him remained a matter for separate consideration, but there was no doubt there would be consequences. Ava barely spoke at the preliminary hearing. Kate handled everything, clearly and without extra words. Ava sat, listened, and thought about the strange feeling that wouldn't leave her. Not joy, not relief in the usual sense. Something more like stepping out of a long, dark room into the light. You don't immediately understand what has happened. You just squint and breathe. After the hearing, outside on the street, Kate said, "The case is strong. The probability of a guilty verdict is high. The specific sentence and measures are up to the court, but the direction is clear." "How long will it take?" Ava asked. "Several months. A criminal trial isn't as fast as a family court case. But you are no longer under threat. Your position is secure. Ava nodded, zipped up her jacket against the crisp air, and walked to the bus stop. On the way, she called Olivia. Her daughter was at Chloe's after school, waiting for her. "I'll be there soon," Ava said. "Did you eat?" Aunt Chloe made pancakes. "Good. I'm on my way." Life went on. It seemed almost surprising that against the backdrop of everything that had happened in the last month and a half, life simply went on. Pancakes at Chloe's, work at the salon, the line at the grocery store, the morning alarm clock. But that, perhaps, was the main proof that she had made it through. Not heroically, without drama. She just made it through. In mid-November, Ava adjusted her work schedule at the salon, picking up an extra day and negotiating a small increase in her hourly rate. The money was necessary. The mortgage, Olivia, daily expenses. The first child support payment from Stephen arrived at the end of October, right on time. She didn't know what had compelled him to pay on time: shame, fear of consequences, or something else. She didn't think about it. She just saw the deposit in her account and transferred the necessary amount to pay the utility bills. By then, Chloe Davis was visiting their home almost every week. Not out of pity, but because Olivia had grown attached to her, and because having dinner with 3 people was more fun. Chloe would bring something for dessert. They would sit in the kitchen after Olivia went to bed and talk. Not always about important things, more often about work, funny stories, random thoughts. This is how a life rebuilds itself. Not through grand decisions, but through ordinary evenings when you can talk about nothing at all. One evening, towards the end of November, Olivia brought Ava a drawing. "This is for you," she said. On the paper was a house, drawn schematically, the way children do. A square, a triangular roof, windows with curtains. Next to the house stood 2 figures, one big, one small. The big figure had chestnut hair. Olivia had colored it in very carefully with a brown-colored pencil. At the bottom, written in block letters, were the words, "We are home." Ava took the drawing, looked at it, then looked at her daughter. "Thank you," she said. Olivia nodded with a serious expression, like a person who has completed an important task, and went to her room. Ava taped the drawing to the wall, next to Olivia's class schedule, in the place where all the necessary, everyday things were kept. The criminal trial of Jessica Thorne concluded in February of the following year. Ava sat in the courtroom next to Kate. The room was small, institutional, with high windows and a flag in the corner. Jessica sat at the defendant's table in a dark blazer, her lawyer beside her. Throughout the entire reading of the verdict, she never once turned toward Ava. The judge read the verdict in a steady voice, without intonation. It's how people who do this every day read documents, having long since stopped investing any personal feeling into the words. Ava listened and heard every word, but she perceived them as somehow separate from herself, as if she were reading someone else's story in which she had just happened to play a part. The verdict was guilty. Jessica Thorne was sentenced to 3 years in prison, to be served in a state correctional facility. Taking into account the totality of the circumstances, the premeditation, the advance preparation confirmed by text messages, and the use of a controlled substance as a tool for intentional harm, the court found no grounds for a suspended sentence. The courtroom fell silent. Jessica's lawyer wrote something down. Jessica didn't move, only her shoulders slumped by a few centimeters, barely perceptible, like someone who has been holding themselves together for a long time and has finally let go. Kate leaned over to Ava and said quietly, "It's over. The verdict will take effect after the appeal period, but the court's decision is on our side." Ava nodded. She stood up, zipped her jacket, and walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was cool. She stopped by a window and looked out at the street. A gray February sky, bare trees, people on the sidewalk who had no concern for what had just been announced in the room behind her. Kate came out after her. "How are you?" she asked. "I'm okay," Ava said. And it was the truth. Not bravery, not a mask, just the truth. They left the courthouse together, and on the street, Kate shook her hand, a short, firm handshake, the kind you give to someone who has reached the end without breaking along the way. By that time, Stephen was living in a 1-bedroom rental apartment in another part of town. Olivia saw him once every 2 weeks by arrangement, The meetings were neutral. He would pick her up for a few hours. They would go somewhere. Then he would bring her back. Olivia didn't talk about the meetings in detail, and Ava didn't ask. That, too, was part of the new life. Not getting involved where she didn't need to be. In the spring, Olivia signed up for an art class. She asked to do it herself after her teacher praised one of her drawings in class. Ava signed her up. On Saturdays, they would take the streetcar across town, and Olivia would look out the window with that special, focused expression of people who have something important happening inside them. One day, on the streetcar, Olivia asked, "Mom, do you regret how everything turned out?" Ava thought about it. Really thought, not answering right away. "No," she said. "I only regret the time we wasted doing things the wrong way. But that's over now." Olivia looked out the window again. The city stretched out beyond the glass. Buildings, trees with new spring leaves, people at bus stops. "Okay," she said. "Then I don't regret it either." The drawing, "We Are Home," still hung on the wall, its edges a little faded now. But Ava didn't take it down. Not because she forgot, but because every time she passed it, she saw it and thought, this is what's important. Not the victory over Jessica, not the court's decision, not the signed divorce papers. People aren't broken by circumstances. They are broken by the decision to give up. Ava never made that decision, and Olivia would remember that.